Because of that, it still grows tax deferred, but ultimately at the end, 100% of that money is taxed later, and good old Uncle Sam dips his hand into there. So let me give you an example. Say you make $80,000 while you were working. You put 10% of your salary into your 401k. Well, you have $8,000 into your 401k if you made $80,000. Also, you get the company match. Any company match would always go into this column because that's an employee expense. And your money is growing into this area right here, okay? Well, on your taxes, you don't actually pay for $80,000 of showing that's your income. You got the upfront tax deduction. So you actually only paid and declared $72,000 of taxable income, but the price or the trade-off is this is 100% taxable later, okay? Whereas over here, if your employer even offered a Roth 401k option, or you put money into a Roth IRA, say you made $80,000, you put 10% into a Roth 401k, or you put money into a Roth IRA, well, you pay taxes on $80,000. Anything with a Roth label is after-tax dollars. So even though this sounds really great, tax never, okay? This is after-tax money that goes in. It grows tax deferred and hopefully doubles, triples, quadruples. When you take it out, never taxed again because good old Uncle Sam got his tax burden out of those funds up front. And the other assets in this column are municipal bonds and the cash value of life insurance and the myriad of ways to do that, okay? I really love this sheet from a financial planning standpoint. We're going to revisit it later on, but I want to introduce the fact that when you're in retirement, there's these 3 different buckets, and how you withdraw your income is very important, okay?
We did have a few questions come in, on the first one being, does Thrivent sell auto insurance?
Oh, we do not. So of the insurance
okay.
protection measures, we do life insurance, long-term disability, long-term care. Those are the 3 main protection measures. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Good question.
And then with the pyramid, is legacy planning realistic for someone with chronic illness?
Yes, I think, honestly, I think no matter how much assets, and if you don't even think there might be anything left over, or what's the point, I think that's kind of a defeating mindset, but B, I think a way for you to love other people really well is to think intently about that question now. And no matter what it is reflective of who you are as a person. So how do you want to be known, and how do you want to love other people right now via that legacy planning and asking those hard questions. Yeah.
Yeah. And then our last question for this section that came in was, which bucket does term life insurance fall into?
So if we go here, so term life insurance does not have any sort of cash value. It is not permanent in nature. It's temporary. So you're kind of renting the death benefit protection, and then that term expires and it goes away. So that actually would not fall into any of these 3 categories because it doesn't build up a cash value. It's not permanent. And then if it doesn't have any cash value, you can't get access to it, because that's the only reason these are here. They build up cash value. You have access to that money. And the way permanent life insurance works, whether it's whole life, variable universal life, or universal life, up to what you've put into those vehicles, you can get out income tax free. So that's why it's in the tax never column. Yeah.
Gotcha. So we just had a follow-up kind of comment to that. So they're saying that then the person who is to receive the term life insurance, then that dollar amount would go into one of these buckets. Is that correct?
So you're talking, say, the death benefit. If, say, somebody passed, they have a 10-year term, $250,000 to get spread to 5 different ways. They each get $70,000. What happens with that $70,000?
Yeah.
Actually, that was bad math. $50,000. Okay.
Yeah.
So the $50,000,
I didn't catch that.
the death benefit of what you receive in life insurance is income tax free. It depends what you, so it's like cash. You could take that as cash, put it into any of these types of vehicles, of course, with IRS limitations of how much you can put into each one on a given tax year. Okay. But then it becomes liquid available funds, almost like it's right here. How do you want that money to be used in your plan, and lean into any of these options? But before, say, somebody were to pass and then have the death benefit go to their beneficiaries, any permanent life insurance builds up cash value as well as an accompanying death benefit. And if you need money, you can draw from the cash value, which lowers the death benefit, but at least you have access to the money. So this is kind of the here and now. You have access to cash value in this column. Okay.
All right. Sounds good. That's all we got for now.
Great. Okay. So really, how to handle retirement withdrawals is unique to your personal situation. Okay. And then before we even kind of leave this section, I want to throw out these 5 different things. So one is just really understanding the role of Social Security, understanding a little bit how it's taxed, and really making a wise decision of when to take it and what role that looks like in your plan. Because most people, when they are eligible, which is age 62, many people just take it right off the bat. And I think sometimes understanding the ramifications of that decision is important. So one thing about Social Security is that, yes, you can take it right off the bat. It depends at what your full retirement age, as far as the different delineations within that, but essentially you get paid to wait. So yes, you get, say if you're right here, you're born between 43 and 1954, then essentially your full retirement age is 66 according to the IRS. Well, if you take it at 62 and say $1,000, just for easy numbers sake, $1,000 a month would be your age 66 benefit. Well, you're only going to get $750 a month if you take it at age 62. You get paid either 5% to wait or 6 2/3% to wait, depending on how far removed from your full retirement age, just to kick that can down the road. And this is important because Social Security has a cost of living adjustment, so it has some inflation protection, as well as, especially if you look at a married couple, say that you have the high wage earner is drawing $3,000 a month. The lesser wage earner is only getting $1,000 a month. And say this person passes. This person passes first. Well, this person is not necessarily stuck with the $1,000 a month because that's their benefit. They actually get the higher of the two benefits. So the lesser of the two drops off, and you get to keep the higher of the two, the $3,000 a month benefit, okay? So especially when you're looking at kind of the overall breadwinner of a household, you want to preserve and get the highest Social Security that you can allow to get by kicking that can down the road. So as I said, you get about 5% and then even escalating to 6 2/3% just to not take Social Security. Each and every month that you delay Social Security, you get a little bit more. And after your full retirement age, in this graph at 67, you get paid 8% a year to wait. So you can actually get the max of 124%, okay, of your full retirement age benefit. You do not get paid any more to wait after age 70, so take it. After age 70, take it, because you're not getting paid to wait anymore, okay? And a lot of this decision comes down to, your benefit, maybe your spouse's benefit, your longevity, their potential longevity. And this is, nobody's the prophet. We don't know these numbers here, okay? But I think the big thing that I want you to take away is that essentially try to preserve the higher benefit as long as you can. draw maybe other assets just to preserve and take the 6 2/3% or 8% to wait on Social Security. And then also the taxability of Social Security is that Social Security isn't taxable until you start adding income. So if we look at this situation, if most of your money is in this bucket and you're bringing that into your savings and checking account each and every month, well, that's going to cause more and more Social Security to be taxed. That's why tax diversification is key, okay? The other thing is that you need to be aware that we are presently in a very low, historically, tax bracket environment, okay? The Tax Cut and Jobs Act that was passed in 2017 and has a sunset provision in 2025 lowered everybody's tax brackets. So the bracket that is currently 12% was 15%, 22 was 25, 24 was 28, so on and so forth, okay? This 12% to 22% bracket is a big jump, and a lot of people fall into this bracket. And really, this is taxable income, and I don't want to go too much into the weeds on here, but if you basically have $105,000 of income, you get about a $24,800 standard deduction. You are at the very height of the 12% tax bracket. And as I said before, it was 15%. Doesn't sound like much, but it's a 20% sale on taxes, okay? And so one retirement consideration is to take money from the tax later column, you can get it into the tax never column, and you want to fill up your marginal tax bracket so that you have more tax diversification. Because 12% is historically cheap, 22% is historically cheap, and it will probably go to 25% in 2025 or potentially even sooner than that. So that is a tax strategy to use now to make sure that your dollars are spread out. And that's especially if you're a married filing jointly couple, because tomorrow isn't necessarily guaranteed, and you have twice the amount of room in your tax brackets versus a single file taxpayer, as you saw in that column. So I'm not going to look at too many of those charts anymore. This will be recorded. You can look online and you can kind of pour over those as need be. And then tax diversification, again, it's key. And that's a huge planning part, and part of a lot of the value that I bring with people in retirement is how to provide tax diversification. The other part is there's 5 major derailers in retirement. 2 that I want to at least look at in the group is making sure that you don't minimize the inflation risk. We just had a $2 trillion stimulus package with the CARES Act. We could potentially have another one. If I were a betting man, we might have increased tax rates going up. That also means some inflation around that, and that erodes your $1 of purchasing power, where it's worth a whole lot more today than it will tomorrow. And that's why Social Security, that has a cost of living adjustment, is key to help protect that as an asset. If you have a pension, hopefully it has some inflation risk with that. Too, because there's rising extended care costs, long-term care costs, and we want to be able to mitigate that risk and do that. And then really, I think from myself and as an advisor is try to give people some peace of mind, and just know that there's 2 main levers that you're pulling, okay? And that is saving while you were working, and then now it's spending. And once you get into retirement, it gives you peace of mind. Hopefully you saved enough, because there's really only one lever that you can continue to pull, and that is having to adjust your spending. And so in doing so, if you are able to do that better than others, you're going to have more peace of mind. If you saved more early on, well, that's going to give you more peace of mind that you can spend more later with still having that peace of mind, and what tax withdrawal strategies to do that. Okay. All right. Before we move on to the next section, Liz, do we have any other questions?
Yeah, we did have 2 questions come in. When was the last time these percentages were changed on getting paid to wait?
Ooh, Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. Those percentages, just to be even more nuanced, if you are more than 3 years from your full retirement age, you get paid 5% a year, or 5% a year to wait. Okay. If you are within 3 years of your full retirement age, you get paid 6 2/3% a year to wait. And then if you're after full retirement age, all the way up to age 70, you get 8%. But I do not know when those have been changed last. I would have to look that up. I can get back to you. Send me an email. More than happy to, because I'm kind of curious now as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then kind of a similar question of how often do tax bracket adjustments happen? So this happened in 2017. Is this a common thing that they get adjusted? Something we should expect for the future?
Yeah, it's really hard. I think you have to look at historically where brackets have been. Because there's so many, just every election, the dynamics of whether there's going to be a majority of which party. So when Trump came into office, one of his key measures was trying to get the Tax Cut and Jobs Act passed. Many people weren't sure if he'd be able to do that and get that passed. And now here we are, in 2020, we still have these tax brackets. So to answer the question, it's tough to say. It's really, you can't predict it. All you can do is make the wisest, most prudent decisions as you can now, given current tax rates and where potentially they may go in the future.
That's great advice.
It's a toughie.
That's all we got.
I will say one more thing. My line as an advisor is if you are in a 25% or less marginal income tax bracket, then a Roth becomes a viable discussion point. Because odds are you could potentially be in a lower tax bracket later. So, but it's a pretty nuanced conversation. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sure.
All right. Very good questions. Glad you're paying attention still. Okay. All right. Now we're going to move into that red triangle, estate planning. Okay. And really there's 3 options. The first 2, great options. Give to people you love, give to places you love. Unfortunately, the last one is not great. You're going to give to politicians you love? I don't know. Okay, so politicians or taxes, okay, is the 3rd place that your money can go. And again, my job as an advisor, and I tell people this all the time, is to help your money reflect your values. And I look at people's values and say, okay, well, what values do you hold? And I would look at 2 things. How do you spend your time? And where does your money go? And so this one gets down to the latter, okay, around ensuring that the money goes to the people and places you value the most, and hopefully negate number 3, politicians and taxes, okay? And one thing too I want to talk about with places is that even though I have to obviously give Parkinson's Pointe a little, FaceTime here as far as the place. Any 501c3 charity can be designated for all of these options that I'm talking about. As well, one unique thing about Thrivent, because we're a not-for-profit organization, we have a program called Thrivent Choice that our clients get to choose a 501c3 charity to have part of, say, their premiums or assets under management go to then fund the places that they love. So we try to be a wind at people's back to be more charitable. And we give away about $1 million a week through that Thrivent Choice program to places that our clients choose. And Meredith, if you're listening to this, you will be getting an email from Thrivent so that Parkinson's Pointe can be one of those charities that we can do that. So I've already got the wheels in motion for that. And then lastly, unfortunately, taxes. I like this picture because if I were a guessing man, I would think that tax rates are going to be going up. Okay, and what do we do in a rising tax bracket environment? Okay. So I hope you don't get, cold sweats when you look at this sheet because there's all this gobbledygook. Remember, just look at the 3 columns. But I want to look at these 3 columns and say, all right, where is your money most utilized for the places and people that you want to give to, okay? And before we even do that, I want to go back and do another poll and ask you, essentially, where do you personally, and again, this is all anonymous, but where would you say that you personally have most of your assets in a tax now, tax later, or tax never column? Okay. All right. I'm going to end the poll there. Tax never. Fantastic. Okay. I honestly, usually when I look at people's plan, and that is, I look at their plan, and if I put numbers into these 3 columns, most people that haven't met with an advisor have most of their money here. If they've met or had some sort of wise counsel or looked at it themselves a lot, more assets are here. But it takes an outside action to get money, okay, into this column. So hats off to you, okay, for getting that there. And also looking even longer term, this column is a really nice column to be at. As you may be able to guess, this column is the one where, because good old Uncle Sam has never received his tax burden, he's either going to get it from you or he's going to get it from your beneficiaries or heirs, and taxes can take a whole large chunk out of one's assets, okay? And over here, because they're never taxed again, these are great assets to have go towards people or places. But of course, I want to have some sort of redemptive part to this middle column here. So one thing that I want to make you know of is that if you put places, churches, charities as beneficiaries in those particular accounts, you can bypass taxes and have your money go 100% to charities. So let me take my parents as an example, okay? I have one older sister. She has a daughter, good old little Ruthie, okay? I mentioned that I have 3 kids, Charlie, Maeve, and Amos. And then my parents, they want to have most of their money go to people and places. And so we've designed a lot of their plan for this column and this column to go to us and our kids and what that looks like, okay? But also, they are very passionate and connected to their church. My mom worked for 30 years at a community college. She's very passionate about community college and education. And then my dad was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic at the age of 25, and having money go to the American Diabetes Association. So when we've looked at their respective IRAs, I told them, I was like, Mom, Dad, Katie and I are going to be fine. Why don't you think about having the beneficiaries of these particular accounts go to the places and charities that you value the most? And so they personally put a 40% amount to go to their church, 40% to go to the local community college scholarship education fund, and then 20% to go to the American Diabetes Association. Okay, so their money reflected their values. Rather than having taxes a part of their plan, we negated taxes out of their plan entirely. And this was done as beneficiary designations. They did not have to change up a trust. They did not have to change up a will. That beneficiary designations cut those documents off at the pass if you have as a primary beneficiary or first contingent, however. Okay, so for each of them, the opposite spouse was the primary beneficiary. The first contingent beneficiary or those charities that I named, and their money better reflected their values and negated taxes. Okay, any questions here before we move on?
Yeah, we had one question come in. So right now with so many uncertainties in the world, you know, people are saying the only certainty is uncertainty. And so an annuity oftentimes can guarantee income, which could be really comforting to people right now. But is that just a tax bomb waiting to happen? And that you know, our viewers see annuities in this tax later column.
Okay. Yeah, so annuities, the reason why they are here is that the gains earned into an annuity, they're tax deferred, but yes, they would be taxable. Oftentimes it depends. Inside an annuity, the purpose of any annuity, variable or fixed, is that you would annuitize it and have it be turned into a lifelong income stream. Most people, if they've annuitized that annuity, have turned it into a lifelong income stream that will end at either a single life or a joint life payout. Some people will put either one of those two designations and say, well, I want to make sure at least this money goes for 10 or 15 years because, hey, anything could happen tomorrow, and I just want to make sure this pays out at least to my beneficiaries. So annuities usually are just having that single life or joint life payout so that a single person or a husband and wife know that they're not going to outlive their income, and transferring that risk to an insurer to guarantee that payment option. A few would, or maybe even an annuity that wasn't annuitized, the built up gains. And I would still say, even though taxes are right here to people, it's still an asset that you're giving to people. Very few people are going to say, oh yeah, well, thanks a lot for this annuity, and now it has built up taxable gains in there. Come on, I thought you loved me. It's like, no, they just gave you money. It's not a bad thing. Okay, and also there's usually some built-in way to pay the taxes within these different instruments. So hopefully that answered the question. Like most things, becomes pretty nuanced. No other questions?
Nope, that's all for now.
Okay. All right, we're transitioning. Let's personalize this a little bit. Okay, and this basically says, where are you on your philanthropic journey? Okay, and you look at this spectrum, is it a little bit more giving is sporadic and it's immediate, or is it planned? Is it lasting? Is it repeatable? Do you give essentially by request when people ask? Does it normally take an event? My wife and I love to go to nonprofit fundraisers, whether that's a gala event, a charity golf outing, just a unique night out to learn more about a ministry doing good work or a charity nonprofit doing good work that essentially you want to then give. There's always the ask, right? Or do you give out of relationship? You want to make sure that you know either the person or somebody at that entity really well, and there's an emotional part, there's a relational connectivity to it there. And then even more graduated is probably more commitment. This experience. A lot of your life revolves around maybe being on a board, serving and volunteering. Not just going to an event, hosting a table at an event. That this becomes more of who you are, and you have more of your life revolving around that mission in that entity because you really believe in the good that they're bringing to people, and it's necessary. Okay, and hopefully it's a mix of all of these, but I think too, depending on where you're at in a life stage, where you're at just in overall time to be able to give, sometimes the experience, you're just not there yet. You don't have the gift of time at this present time. But really, like, my job as an advisor is to know and understand my clients, to provide some structure around their assets they're giving, and hopefully make sure that their heart is best reflected through their plan, and that the two are working in conjunction with each other, that the mission and the structure of how we have things set up allows them to be generous now, to be generous later, and living that generous, joyful life. That's the plan, okay? I think this is a really great exercise that you would need to take time outside of this talk to do it. But I call this the mission matrix. And basically start in the upper left-hand corner. Who are you? For my wife and I, who are we? What do we want to do? Why do we live? What's our ethos? What's our mission and vision statement? Even as a couple, which will then help inform what we support. What are those things we want to give our time to? My wife just said yes to being on a board that works with poverty alleviation in Denver. And that goes back to still who we are. We have a long history with the organization. So what do you support? And maybe even working backwards and say, okay, well, this is who we support. This kind of tells us who we are. That informs. It's a two-way street, which will then say, okay, well, how we provide time, resources. I would say, what are you talking to people about? What do you get jazzed up about? What do you think other people need to know about when it comes to just missionally organizations that are doing good work? How many people, do you introduce to Parkinson's Pointe and the different care groups and resources that they offer, and you're passionate about it? Obviously, Greg is passionate about just informing people of the glass half full view of Parkinson's and some ways to continue to help yourself feel better and have more good days than bad. And then that'll inform like what we seek. Okay, so is it that you want to alleviate hunger or poverty, or is it, hey, in our neighborhood, in our community, we want to be a voice for change and helping educate people about healthy eating? And we're not trying to solve the world's problem here. We just want to look locally and what that looks like. Personally speaking, for my wife and I took this picture this morning. This is in our living room. This is our mission statement. Sounds very formal, doesn't it? Okay. That we, the Kinsingers, desire a Christ-centered life filled with adventure. We will invest in others by focusing on the community around us and by having an open door policy. Okay. So ways that we live this out: second Friday of every month, pre-COVID, we haven't done it since March, is that we have a neighborhood barbecue just over at our house. Invite people to come. We grill out the main. People can bring a side or dessert. But for the most part, once Friday rolls around, everybody's done. And really just show up. Stay as long as you want. We have kids, so it usually dissipates by 8:30 or 9 o'clock. And that's just a way that we live out this ethos. And when you look at your money, who are you? That should drive your funds and where they go. Okay. And then on this part, I think a lot of it, like I said before, is around one's life stage. This is where I'm at, the foundation years. I have working income that goes to living expenses. I do a portion that goes to charitable giving. I want and need to build up my net worth so that when I do flip on the retirement switch, that I have some assets from which to draw from. And usually in this stage, the foundation years, you have giving be a part of your budget. Don't think that it's going to happen with the leftovers. You have to make it a priority if you want to make those giving a priority. I'm definitely looking for matching opportunities that stretch my dollar farther. I personally, just being honest, don't have a whole lot of time right now to always give to volunteer events and make that consistent and regular. Especially my job can be all in. And I've said, I'm not going to work the weekends. I'm not going to meet clients for appointments on the weekends. I want to have that time be available for my family. Okay. And then trying to make it a family affair, teaching my kids about generosity, what that looks like. And that's developing more of just that overall ethos around it. But don't fool yourself and say, oh yeah, I'm totally here in the foundation years. I'll give once I've built up my net worth and my nest egg. It ain't gonna happen. It is a muscle you need to start developing now. Make it a priority, especially for the benefit of nonprofits. If you can give systematically and regularly, that helps with their overall funding goals and assuredness of knowing what's coming in the door. And then also I want to look at the pre-retirement, that maybe you are just hustling the last 2 years. You're really trying to get your income. You're trying to save and max out your 401k and build up your net worth and get everything where it needs to be. Then I want to introduce the idea of a donor advised fund. And a donor advised fund, think of it as your own personal giving vehicle that you get an immediate tax deduction when you put money into the donor advised fund. Okay? These are becoming more popular because of the higher standard deduction. Standard deduction used to be $12,400. Okay, now it's $24,800 for a married filing jointly couple. Okay, well, up until if your mortgage interest that you're paying, your charitable giving, different state and local property taxes, and other measures, if you don't get all of those numbers up to $24,800, your charitable giving doesn't help you from a tax standpoint, because the tax deduction, the standard tax deduction is $24,800. 30% of people itemizing went down to 0.3% because of the higher standard deduction. So what people have done is they bunch deductions, okay, into a donor advised fund. It gives them an immediate tax write-off. So you give into this donor advised fund, okay? You get an immediate tax deduction. That money is invested in the market. It grows. So we use an organization called In Faith. That's their logo. It's a faith-based organization. That's, a bent cross there. I also want you to think of it as a plus sign, because a huge advantage to having a donor advised fund is you're not giving out of a stagnant checking or savings account. You're giving out of an account that grows. It's invested in the market. It's growing your overall dollar amount that you can give. But the reason why you would bunch it is that, well, let me give you an example. Okay, so I had clients. I've had 3 different clients over the last 2 years. One of them sold a business, one of them sold a lot, and one of them had appreciated stock. Each of those would be taxable events to them, okay? The appreciated stock, they're going to have to pay 15% capital gains. The real estate, there was going to be some overall, because of depreciation in the real estate, some overall gains. That's going to wind up on their 1040 and have to pay taxes on. And then also, we had somebody who had a high income year. They sold a business, okay? In each of those, for that one snapshot year, they were going to have a high taxable event. Well, also, we decided to take some of the appreciated stock, okay, that they had. So it's nice to have a lot of money on the sidelines here. And as long as you do it in the same tax year, it's going to end up on your 1040. So they took some appreciated stock. They bypassed capital gains, okay? Actually, let's go back to this one. They bypassed capital gains. They put money in the donor advised fund. That money grows. They have the gift of time to grant out 2 different organizations money from their donor advised fund, okay? So the money that you put into a donor advised fund, that is an irrevocable designation into the fund, but you have the gift of time to grant it out however you want, to whichever charities you want. You can change that at any time. So think of this as almost your own mini personal giving fund. There's like its own small 501c3 that is a tax write-off when you do it. Then you're given the gift of time to do that. 2 of the 3 of those clients that I mentioned that had that instance of a high tax year, they actually left their donor advised fund. If tomorrow wasn't afforded them, they left it to their kids. So then their kids take on this donor advised fund, that it becomes a generational giving vehicle for that family to put money into and have that money be doled out. So it is a give now technique that has the potential of almost a generational giving vehicle to give later, okay? So I want to make sure you people understand what a donor advised fund is. Any questions?
Mm-hmm.
on that end.
Yeah, we do have a few questions that have come in. I'll save one for maybe a little bit later. Well, I'll ask it now, and then you can decide if you want to answer it now or not. Is it unwise to give in retirement? You're talking about how giving is a muscle, but is that an unwise thing to do in retirement?
I mean, there needs to be a whole lot more context around
Mm-hmm.
that question. I mean, as a whole, I think no. I think it's wise to give in retirement. I think Maslow's hierarchy of needs says that all of us want to make sure that we're taken care of first. But to what degree can I look at sacrificial giving and say, oh, okay, well, no, I might not get a Starbucks. We might not go out to eat as much. I might have to say no to that trip. But that allows our money to be reflective of other things. So you might have to say no
Mm-hmm.
to more things than you would want to say yes to some of these missions, organizations, and charities. I
Mm-hmm.
think obviously that's a personal heart decision, and
Mm-hmm.
it's hard for me to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. And then we have a few questions about the donor advised fund. So when does it make sense to open a donor advised fund? Does it make sense to only open right before you retire? You talked about, clients of yours who were doing a business, who put the money into that. Is this something that is, only for rich people who are selling a business, or can anyone, would it make sense for anyone to open a donor advised fund?
Yeah. I don't want to make it sound like it's just rich people. Anyone can do that. I've even had a friend who's like, I want to be able to, I have X amount in our annual budget that we put towards giving. I haven't even given that money yet this year. I don't want to make a knee-jerk reaction. Can I just put this into a donor advised fund and make up the decision later? Yeah, you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of financial planning is timing. A lot of these strategies came down to timing of what happened outside of somebody's kind of cookie cutter financial picture, selling a business, deciding to retire, having some appreciated stock. Well, the timing for that helps when the market's high. We want to take that appreciated security, put it into the donor advised fund. I get the full and complete tax write-off for the market value, but I have the gift of time to then put that out there. So, I had somebody that had $70,000 in AT&T stock, and that just wasn't probably smart to have it in one entity. So let's take some of that off the table. Let's put it into a donor advised fund. By doing that, here's your giving bucket. Get that tax write-off. And for the next 5 years, that becomes your giving bucket from which you give from, and you just take the higher standard deduction every year.
Gotcha. And then is it, once that money is in there, can you get it out, or is it in there for good?
Yeah, in there for good. Yeah, so I mean, you don't make that decision lightly. It's irrevocably designated for charities. You can't take it, you can't give it to people. You can only give it to places. But you are able to pull the strings on when, how much, how often, as well as a big thing that I want to reiterate is that your money is growing in that bucket. So I had a single female that put money in a donor advised fund. She gave $350 a month to a friend who was doing work over in Ireland with an organization. She wanted to support her. She did that. Well, she gave $350 a month, times that by 12, and we've got $4,200 that she gave. Well, because the money in her donor advised fund had grown over the year quite sizably, this was in 2017, then it really only cost her $150 because her donor advised fund had appreciated so much. It cost her $150 when you look at just the overall balance to give $350 a month.
Wow. Yeah, that's an awesome story. And also makes it seem like accessible to all people too. That, you don't have to sell a business to open a donor advised fund. If you have, a consistent giving plan, it could make sense for you.
Yeah, ironically, this was from her grandpa that had given her some mutual funds that had appreciated so much. that then she wanted to honor him in that by putting it into a donor advised fund, give out of that, and it was just wise stewardship all the way around.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yep, that's all we got right now.
Great. For the sake of time, we should probably keep going. All right, this is a visual we're not even going to spend any time on. You're there, okay? The last part of where you're at on this giving journey is that if you are in retirement, there becomes a new giving paradigm. You kind of have a fixed income. You have your net worth, you have your guaranteed income, and usually a percentage. And I'm 40, I still think of percentages a lot. But I think you look at what your overall piece of the pie is. What percentage do you want to give of your funds? Whether that's a percentage of net worth that you leave through beneficiaries to people or through your will or through a trust to do that. And what percent can you give now charitably? And there's a lot of charitable remainder trusts that you can do with even getting an income stream now, but having the remainder of that asset go to a charity to help be a give and receive type technique. But one thing I want to really hone in on is qualified charitable distributions, because qualified charitable distributions are a percentage that you would normally need to take. If you're anywhere 65 and over, and definitely if you're 70 and a half and over, you've heard of RMDs. So RMDs are required minimum distributions. And essentially within that is that the government says, hey, you have an IRA, an inherited IRA, an old 401k. We want our tax burden out of these funds. We gave you tax deferred growth until you retire. And hello, you're 70 and a half, and now it's your 72. Now you're 72. You need to take money out of here. And they force a certain percentage of money out, which starts roughly at about 4.5%, peaks at 6%, and kind of goes down. It's a bell curve, okay? But essentially, that money is being forced out. So if we look at, say, $100,000 in an IRA, and 4.5% of that's coming out, that's $4,500 a year. Okay, that you are forced to show and pay taxes on, okay? And if you look at that and say, all right, well, I'm not gonna take that $4,500 as income. I don't wanna have to pay taxes on it. But if you have that money go from the trustee who's holding your $100,000, and then you also have a percentage to basically have that money come out and it goes straight to a charity of your choice, then that's not a taxable event for you. That is a qualified charitable distribution. You can either have the RMD, that amount, the RMD amount, go to, say, a charitable fund at In Faith. You could have it go straight to the entity of their choice, however you'd want it to look. So I have a single female client who just turned 70 and a half in July. She got a nice 70 and a half birthday card from me. Just like I hope you did too, because it's a big deal, okay, in the financial world, at least. And I said, hey, congratulations, you can now do qualified charitable distributions. And she decided not to give to her church and these two other entities that she gave to anything up until 70 and a half. And she was able to give $18,000 to her church, $3,000 to a nonprofit that does work in Kenya, and $3,000 to a local nonprofit in their community. And normally she would give about $250 a month to these entities. Well, she did that basically through qualified charitable distributions. She avoided the tax. The charity got 100% of that money and negated all taxes out of her plan. So you can do up to $125,000 to do a qualified charitable distribution each and every year. And it is a very great tax efficient way to save. And to basically, if you don't need those funds, to have it go to charities that you support, okay? Well, we'll take questions at the end. We're kind of running low on time. Okay, next poll question here. Last one, I believe. All right, and that is misconceptions. Which myth or misconception do you most identify with? You need to be rich, old, or both in order to do charitable giving. I can't change my plans once they're made. They're set in stone. Oh, I probably need to launch that poll. There we go. Sorry about that. And then, I'll worry about that later. All right, looks like we have our one attendee. Thank you, Liz. Okay, I'm going to share that result with you. There you go. Okay. And all right, so I need to be rich, old, or both. Now, let's be honest. Money helps in financial conversations, but that's why I like to think in percentages. Okay. And I think no matter what amount it is, it matters. And honestly, my job as an advisor is to treat somebody who has very little zeros behind their balance the same as somebody who has a whole lot of zeros behind the balance and the number on there. So I think the myth of I need to be rich, old, or both, how I would uncover that, and this was something that was told me a long time ago, is that I can't do everything, but I can do something. So what is that something I can do? And I think we're all called to be wise, faithful people into what you've been given and what you've accumulated as your hard-earned assets. And I look at what my hard-earned assets, I only was able to accrue those because I was given the gift of time and the skills, talents, abilities that was, for the most part, given to me. I hopefully refine those and are becoming more and more skilled at my craft. But what can I do? And that's really what the root of the question is. The other one is I can't change it once plans are made. Well, especially beneficiary designations, it's usually one form. Donor advised fund, you have the money in there, it's irrevocable to put it in. You can't get it back out if you need it, but you can change the beneficiaries and how those grants are made. Okay? And this is just, the last one is just classic. I'll worry about that later. Okay? Kick the can down the road. You know, the fact that I don't know what to do becomes a decision of no, I'm not going to do anything. And that's usually probably not the best posture with which to be at. Okay? For the sake of time, we're not going to look at the long-term care and how to wield that sword. I will be honest that, you know, many of you with Parkinson's, you would not be able to get long-term care insurance. You're uninsurable with Parkinson's disease. Long-term care insurance isn't easy to get, but it's more of if you have a policy, how do you lean into it wisely? What do you do? And how do you have your money work for the best for you here? Because there's a lot of different ways to solve that need. And that's a longer conversation. And then lastly, we have the CARES Act and the Secure Act. Both came in the last 9 months. A big thing is if you didn't need money out of your IRA, inherited IRA, put it right back. Okay, if you allow your money to grow tax deferred, it lasts longer than taking it. And so the government says, hey, if you don't need it, we're going to give you this tax advantage. We're going to waive required minimum distributions. Another thing is you can take up to $100,000 out of qualified plans, meaning traditional IRAs, 401ks, avoid the 10% premature withdrawal penalty. It's still taxable. And you actually have 3 years to put that $100,000 back if need be. And then most cash donations are limited to 100% of your adjusted gross, or sorry, 50% of your adjusted gross income. The CARES Act says through the remainder of the year, you can write off 100% of your cash donations up to your adjusted gross income. And then the Secure Act, a big thing was if you've ever been the recipient of any IRA monies, you could normally string that over the entirety of your lifetime. And now the government says, we want our tax burden out of those funds in a 10-year period. And so the stretch IRA is eliminated, you have 10 years to take that money out. And then, like I said before, when you are forced to take money out of your IRAs, 401ks, anything in that tax later column, is been moved from age 70 and a half to age 72. There's some really good planning that can happen between these numbers because you're kind of given the best of both worlds. And that's a further conversation around that. So in wrapping things up, overall, this is where we've looked at the now retirement income strategies, charitable giving strategies, both now and later, and then a quick debrief on long-term care, Secure Act, CARES Act. So any last questions around that?
Nope, we did not have any come in since we were able to cover them as we went.